let's persist with this conversation. We're going to turn to the columnist at the Daily Telegraph's Tim Stanley. Tim, a very good afternoon to you. Let's start with PMQs. The political obsessives in our country can sometimes obsess too much about PMQs and what happens in the cockpit of the nation. But boy, oh boy, it was one of those days, wasn't it?
It was almost painful to watch. The Prime Minister has become a human piñata. And when you weigh up in your mind what is likely to eventually push him to resign, rather than being forced out, what's likely to make him resign, it's this issue of how much more of this can he take? Be it the Beth Rigby interview the night before, in which he just kept hanging his head and looking upwards in that Princess Diana style that he does. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't rouse a party. I don't know how many more of those interviews he could take. And I don't know how many more PMQs like this he can take, where it's not just that he's being attacked, not just he's being accused of being a liar, which is more or less being stated openly, which you're not supposed to in Parliament now, but it's more or less being stated openly that he is a liar. It's not just taking attacks by David Davis, it's not just taking the defections, it's that business can't move on. And every time a Tory MP steps up at PMQs to say something like, does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is the best country in the world and it's all thanks to him? It just feels silly. And it just feels like what it is, which is a lame attempt to distract from the fact that the Prime Minister's very character is on trial. If you can't move on from that, if you can never move on from that, no one lets you do it, that's the point at which Prime Ministers very seriously start to consider resignation.
Yeah, and the problem is, I'm minded of that famous Dennis Healey quote, when in a hole, stop digging. You know, even in responding to David Davis, when the Prime Minister said, I don't recognise that Leo Amery quote. What? You wrote a book, a biography of Winston Churchill. How could you possibly not be aware of that quote? Of course he was aware of it.
Yeah, this is an example of the Boris style of going and sort of charming your way out of a corner. It doesn't really work in that setting, and it doesn't work again when it's that very style which is on trial. That's the problem. It's his character. And it all comes back to the things that people have long suspected about Boris Johnson, that he is disorganized, he is a libertine, he's not really in command of things. I think when historians come to write this history, I think what they'll say is that Johnson came in, and one of the first things he did was deconstruct the machinery in Number 10. The plan was to get Dominic Cummings to then build an Apollo 10 style moon mission to replace it. But then they fell out, Cummings went, and the machinery was never rebuilt. And that's when you get chaos like this. There is no one in the hierarchy who said to him in May 2020, this mustn't happen. And there is no one in the hierarchy right now to say to him, here's what you should say at PMQs. And there is no one in the hierarchy to say to him, you should resign. He's got rid of anyone who could tell him what to do. And the problem is that right now someone needs to do that. And it's very difficult to see how this problem gets fixed without a hierarchy in place to take command and restore some order.
Tim, in a word, I mean, we can talk about Cummings and the tragic irony from the Prime Minister's perspective that here is somebody he stood loyally by during the Barnard Castle dispute, who's knifed him repeatedly. We can talk about what many Tory backbenchers will consider to be the treachery of one of their own going over. But the truth is, it felt today like a Rubicon had been crossed. It felt today like, to adopt the language, the Churchillian language that was expressed at times, like the beginning of the end, an end game starting.
Yeah, we keep thinking that he can pull this off because he's done it before, and also because there's a rhythm to the day, that you begin the day with things coming back together, and you start the day by thinking maybe he can survive. But then by the end of it, either there's a defection or there's an angry speech, or most importantly, there's another piece of evidence comes out that suggests he's not telling the truth. And that's the problem, is the narrative is out of his hands. The broadcast media somehow has a pipeline to embarrassing images and quotes and emails that it is drip feeding. I said he was like a human piñata. Well, to mix the metaphors, this is like Japanese water torture. Every day there is a new slice, right? Every day there's a new drip. It's out of his hands. And it's difficult to see that drip, drip, drip of scandal ending because one suspects it's true.
Well, we'll find out, maybe. Tim Stanley, thanks very much indeed.